Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating topic together, the complex world of chemical weathering. When we look at solid stone, it just seems so permanent, right? Totally indestructible. But as we'll see today, nature actually has a highly effective chemical toolkit that systematically alters and transforms even the hardest minerals on Earth. Here's our roadmap for the explainer. First, we'll define chemical weathering. Second, we'll look at the action of water. Third, hydrolysis and clay formation. Fourth, oxidation versus reduction. Fifth, carbonation and rock etching. And finally, we'll wrap up with the ultimate conclusion.
Okay, Section 1, Defining Chemical Weathering, the Transformation of Minerals.
So, chemical weathering is pretty complex in nature. It's essentially the transformation of original material into entirely new compounds, and it does this by bringing about an alteration in the minerals themselves. And an absolutely crucial fact to remember here is that this transformative chemical action takes place mainly right at the surface of the rocks.
Okay, let's dive into this because several key factors heavily influence this process. Chemical weathering doesn't just happen equally everywhere. Actually, it's highly pronounced in humid tropical regions. Plus, its overall effectiveness is tied really closely to the specific mineral composition of the rocks. But hey, it's not just about climate and minerals. Plants and animals also contribute, both directly and indirectly. They biologically produce oxygen, carbon dioxide, and certain reactive acids that go to work on these earth materials.
Moving on to Section 2, the action of water, solution and hydration. First up is solution. Now, water is often called a universal solvent, right? Well, its solubilizing action is actively enhanced when it contains dissolved carbon dioxide, organic and inorganic acids, or salts. Because of this, most minerals are affected by the solubilizing action of water to varying degrees. As the continuous action of flowing or percolating waters removes these soluble substances, the rock literally no longer remains solid. It develops holes, rills, or rough surface, and ultimately just decomposes.
Our next mechanism here is hydration. This is defined as the chemical combination of water molecules with a mineral to form an entirely new mineral. And it's important to note that this is a major chemical weathering process, particularly when we're talking about secondary minerals.
Owing to hydration, the original mineral physically changes in some pretty dramatic ways. It swells, it loses its luster, it becomes much softer, and ultimately, it tends to simply fall apart. It's a highly dynamic and destructive transformation.
To really understand this, let's look at a chemical equation as a sort of structural recipe. If we start with the mineral hematite and nature adds water molecules through hydration, those molecules chemically combine. The yield of this reaction is a completely new mineral called limonite. So water literally binds into the chemical structure to create something totally new.
Let's head into Section 3, hydrolysis and clay formation.
Let's break down this definition a bit. Hydrolysis involves the partial dissociation of water into hydrogen and hydroxyl ions. These ions combine with primary minerals and bring about massive changes, like the exchange and decomposition of the crystalline structure and the formation of new minerals. This results in complete disintegration or really drastic modification. Furthermore, this hydrolytic activity gets aggressively accelerated whenever there's dissolved carbon dioxide, other minerals, and organic acids present.
So the crucial point is this. Hydrolysis reactions may be considered as the forerunners of clay formation. This is a genuinely vital scientific outcome of the chemical weathering process that fundamentally shapes the Earth's surface.
Let's walk through a step-by-step example to vividly illustrate just how drastic these structural and compositional modifications can be. We begin with muscovite, which is a rigid 2-to-1 primary mineral. As weathering occurs, it actually breaks down in size to the colloidal range. During this breakdown, part of its potassium is lost, while some silica is added from surrounding weathering solutions. The net result? It becomes an entirely different mineral called ileite, which has a less rigid structure and an electronegative charge.
Moving right along to Section 4, oxidation versus reduction.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the direct contrast. In oxidation, oxygen combines with the mineral. It's aided by moisture and mostly occurs after hydrolysis. Crucially, the oxidation of iron reduces its size and increases its electrical charge. This creates electrical and structural imbalances in iron-containing minerals like pyroxenes, amphiboles, and biotite. Conversely, we have reduction, which is the removal or loss of oxygen. This occurs primarily in submerged areas. In a reduction reaction, iron reduces to a highly soluble ferrous form.
Section 5,
carbonation and rock etching.
So carbonation is the combination of carbon dioxide with any base. This process effectively decomposes the minerals of rocks. And hey, remember those biological factors we mentioned earlier? Well, organic matter actually accelerates carbonation because it leads to higher carbon dioxide production.
Let's trace how this systematically leaves a rock structurally weak. First, carbon dioxide combines with a base. This reaction forms new chemical compounds. Because of this conversion, the bases that were originally present in the rocks can be solubilized and subsequently removed. Without those bases holding the whole structure together, the rock is just made weak. And this brilliantly illustrates the real-world impact. Carbonic acid, or carbonated water, has a direct etching effect on rocks like limestone, or really any other rocks that contain calcium or magnesium carbonates as their cementing materials. This etching effect directly leads to their breakage and, yep, you guessed it, the formation of new minerals.
And that brings us to Section 6, the ultimate conclusion.
The source material summarizes it perfectly with this statement. It may be concluded that chemical weathering involves destruction of rocks and minerals into simple new compounds. While we often think of weathering as merely breaking things down or destroying them, it is, in reality, a continuous chemical engine that creates simple, entirely new compounds out of the old.
Which leaves us with this final thought to ponder. If nature's chemical toolkit is constantly destroying rocks to create simple new compounds, what future minerals are slowly being forged right now, in this very moment, by water, oxygen, and carbon dioxide? It's kind of wild to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep exploring.